Okay, let's take a look at spiritual enlightenment. First of all, what is enlightenment? Enlightenment is not about perfection in any way. Everything I'm talking about here is from Daniel Ingerman's book, Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha. He has a chapter where he looks at 31 different models for enlightenment, and a lot of them are about perfection, perfect action, perfect thought, perfect speech, and he rejects all those. The only model he doesn't reject is the non-duality model. Now, non-duality is an English translation of a Sanskrit word, Advaita. Advaita literally means not two. There's only the world, basically. That's what non-duality means. And he also states that if you look at all the different lineages of Buddhism, there are anywhere from 2 to more than a dozen different named states of enlightenment. So there isn't just one final destination that everybody agrees on. And the trainings in Buddhism, this is about the Vipassana tradition, which is the one that's very popular in the Americas. Training in morality is the first training, and this is essentially ordinary spirituality. This is trying to do the spiritual virtues and avoid the spiritual vices. Then there's training on concentration. This is where you're trying to do your meditative attention to whatever your meditation object is. Then there's the insight that you get from all of this. And you can get enlightenment at any point here, but when enlightenment happens, you still have to do more training in morality. You're not perfect just because you're enlightened. You still have to work on the spiritual virtues and avoiding the spiritual vices. The first insight is impermanence. It knows that everything arises and falls, and the objects aren't permanent, they disappear. And that suffering comes from attachments and aversions. If you're attached to an object that's impermanent, you're going to be unhappy when that object goes away. And finally, there's the non-dual insight, which is the no-self insight. If every sense of a self that I have is really an illusion, that would say that there is no self and that the world and I are one. Now let's examine the Hindu Advaita Vedanta tradition. There's a lot of parts to this because this is a very elaborate philosophy of life and religious practice, but the main insight they have is non-duality. And that can be expressed in a couple of ways. One way is they say that Atman equals Brahman. Atman is supposed to be the true self or the soul of the human, and Brahman is reality. So again, it's this non-duality. This is saying my true self is equal to the entire world. The other way that can be expressed is that there's no subject-object distinction. Now, the Indian Hindu sage Ramana Maharishi emphasized the self-inquiry as being the fastest way to enlightenment. And there's a lot of non-dual teachers here in the West that have latched onto that and talk about this self-inquiry method. And you ask, who am I? Well, I'm not the ego, I'm not the thinker, I'm not the body, I'm not the doer. And the answer given by one author is presence awareness. His name is John Wheeler, and his book is the answer to this question. And it says, presence awareness, just this and nothing else. That's the answer to who I am. And that can also be said as stillness. So again, we know that with ordinary spirituality, you can change from being a thinker only to including the experienced and doer. With more spiritual practices, the experiencer could rise to the top of those three. And then the fully spiritually enlightened would be where I identify with the experiencer only. So if we put labels on these, on this axis here, there's the thinker, which is entirely the human self-model, that's the thinker, the experiencer consciousness, which is only the experiencer consciousness, and animals and ancient humans would have had a doer consciousness. So if you create a triangle of those three states, there are many paths from the thinker consciousness to the experiencer consciousness. So there isn't just one straight line that's the only way to get there. Now let's see if the experiencer consciousness correctly describes the enlightenment instincts. Experience awareness is selfless, and therefore that satisfies it for the no-self model. The experiencer awareness model is equal to the world model. Again, for Atman equals Brahman, check mark for the experiencer consciousness. Experience awareness has no subject-object distinction. Being aware of awareness is experienced as presence awareness by the experiencer, but not by the thinker or doer. And finally, stillness is experienced in that state. So my conclusion is the experiencer consciousness state is the enlightened state that these traditions are talking about. That's what they're getting to with their spiritual practices. So I'd like to thank you for directing your top-down attention to my presentation. And I hope that your experiencer intuitively understood how this three-agent model of consciousness explains spirituality. And I'm welcome any questions. And also go to my website and sign up for updates. You'll be notified if I have new videos available. And the most important thing is you'll be notified when I finally publish the book. So are there any questions? I'm over time. I don't know if you want to do questions or you can talk to me afterwards.